About a year ago, the Chiefs traded New York a third-round conditional pick and a sixth-round pick for wide receiver Kadarius Toney. And while he had flashes last year helping the team in the playoffs and the Super Bowl, he's been extremely quiet so far this year in spite of reportedly being looked at as the team's wide receiver one heading into the 2023 season. So let's talk about the overall lack of production so far from Toney and why this could be happening, as we also take a look at the entire team and how they are performing halfway through the 2023 season. But first, how about those? First up, I found one of the funniest photos that was shared by Keith Kinnan on X, Twitter, and that was the very moment that Mike Edwards lateraled the ball back to Brian Cook after McDuffie forced the fumble on Tyreek against the Dolphins in Germany, and standing in between them during this exchange was Joshua Williams, who looked absolutely terrified that the ball was leaving Mike Edwards' hands. Like, what are you doing? And this close-up of his eyes is picture perfect. He was shook to his core, and it's one of the best photos I've seen from this game. And after the Chiefs' win over the Dolphins, ESPN released their most updated FPI rankings, and the Chiefs are at the tippity top of this list. And in case you didn't know, the Football Power Index, FPI, is a measure of team strength that is meant to be the best predictor of a team's performance going forward for the rest of the season. So FPI represents how many points above or below average a team is, and right now the Chiefs are at the very top, just edging out the Ravens. But if you look at their projections, the Chiefs and Eagles currently have the highest odds of making the Super Bowl, with the Chiefs having the highest chances of winning at all. And while this is obviously just a projection, I do like it a lot, considering the Chiefs do indeed typically get better in the second half of the season. Power rankings, however, look a bit different, with NFL.com, The Ringer, as well as the Athletics Power Rankings listing their top three as the Eagles, Ravens, then the Chiefs. Then Pro Football Talk has it Eagles, Ravens, Jags, then Chiefs, which is fine, but the Chiefs just spanked the Jags, and they beat them 3 times in the same calendar year, so whatever. Power rankings are what they are. People are trying their best to rank teams based on their performances, but what we do know is the Chiefs are currently the 1 seed in the AFC, with the Ravens matching their record but having more losses in the conference. The Chiefs have 1 loss against the Broncos, while the Ravens have 2 in the conference, a loss to the Colts in overtime as well as a loss to the Steelers. The Chiefs are also first in the AFC West by like 3.5 games, as they have a win over the Chargers, who are currently in second at 4-4. And now the Chiefs get a chance to rest up on their bye week as they get ready for Monday Night Football against the Eagles. And speaking of the bye week, the Chiefs are not required to provide an injury report this week, so we won't know about any additional injuries from the Dolphins game until next week, though Andy Reid did say after the game there were no real injuries to report on, which basically means no major injuries. There's often players that pop up after a game on the report, even though Andy Reid says that, so we will definitely find out either way next week, but whoever pops up on there, it should be pretty minor. Now, one player we may see return after the bye week is wide receiver Richie James, whose 21-day window to return opened up last week, and a return for the Dolphins game would have been a surprise, in my opinion, but after the bye week, definitely makes more sense for Rick James. And adding a receiver back into the room that's already filled with question marks as far as who is being used, how often, where, and when will certainly be interesting. But hey, Justin Ross is a huge unknown at the moment, being on the commissioner's exempt list, and Richie will be solid to have back as a backup returner to McColl and someone that can plug into the offense as needed. And that brings me to what I want to talk about next, the state of the wide receiver room heading into the second half of the season, with MVS struggling to make contested catches, Sky Moore not yet stepping up as we had hoped, and Kadarius Toney quite possibly being the biggest question mark of that room, as he logged just 7 offensive snaps last week, which was the lowest of any receiver on the team. So let's talk about all that and more. But first, I gotta thank the sponsor of today's video, Raycon. Raycon provides premium tech products at a great price, with their products earning tens of thousands of 5-star reviews since they launched in 2017. From there, they've continued to grow and expand, with the introduction of Raycon Home and Raycon Power Tech being sold at places like Best Buy, Walmart, Kohl's, Amazon, and even via their own online store to over 20 countries. I personally have their everyday earbuds, which are a must-have for any audio lover, especially for the price. They're pretty lit. I've used another brand of earbuds for quite a while now, and honestly, these everyday earbuds from Raycon are not only way more affordable, but also still retain quality sound with very similar features like noise isolation awareness mode that allows me to focus up with less background noise, as well as a few different audio modes. I personally prefer the bass sound mode. On top of that, they are water resistant and have an advertised 32 hours of battery life, and I will say, I've worn them for hours and hours without discomfort or the need to recharge them to this day, which is pretty insane. I've been using them while I script my videos, listening to lo-fi instrumentals in the background, and also to hear the Chiefs press conferences because honestly, the audio in those pressers are pretty quiet. I also leave my basement, believe it or not, to go on walks, and I talk with my editor Troy about upcoming videos or listen to a podcast like New Heights while I do. Basically, these have come in clutch pretty much every day and you can't beat it for the price. So make sure to get an early start on holiday sales by shopping Raycon's early Black Friday sale today. Just click the link in the description and or go to buyraycon.com/Chiefs to get 20 to 50% off site-wide. All right, halfway through the season, we know for sure what we have in the Chiefs defense, and that is the best defense in the Mahomes era. Sure, they are 18th in red zone TDs allowed, 10th in third down conversions allowed, and 16th in rushing yards per game. However, the defense is 4th in yards per game allowed, tied for 3rd in forced fumbles, tied for 2nd in sacks with 31, and are 2nd in points allowed, averaging only 15.9 per game, trailing just the Ravens defense, who has allowed 13.8 points per game. And that's why I say for the first time in the Mahomes era, this Chiefs team is really looking like a defense-first team with so many players having quite the season on the defensive side of the ball and Coach Spags coaching out of his mind. The Chiefs defense is also the youngest defense in the league, which makes it even more insane in my opinion. Now, special teams. Harrison Butker is the real deal over there, being 18 for 18 on the season in field goals, a large reason why the team has won several games. He's also 3 for 3 when kicking 50 or more yards and has yet to miss a PAT, going 22 for 22. Now, on the offensive side of the ball, here's where I want to park the car, don't know what that was, and chat a bit longer. If you compare the first 9 games this season for Mahomes to the first 9 games of last year, the biggest difference is at this point last year, Mahomes had 2,936 passing yards and 25 touchdowns, but this year has thrown just 2,442 yards and 17 touchdowns, which is a difference of nearly 500 yards and 8 touchdowns over the span of 9 games, and makes that an average of 55 less yards and almost one touchdown per game. Believe it or not, though, in spite of the offensive struggles, Mahomes is still the 5th highest graded QB per PFF. He's 3rd in QBR, 7th in completion percentage, 4th in touchdown passes with 17, 3rd in passing yards, and has the least amount of sacks of any NFL starter, only being sacked 9.2% of the time he's been pressured. However, he does have back-to-back weeks with strip sacks recovered by the opposing team, as well as 8 interceptions thrown on the year, which is tied for 4th most with Jordan Love and Jalen Hurts. So, while we know the Chiefs offense has been underperforming, Mahomes is still statistically top 5 in most QB categories for what that is worth. I was also pleasantly surprised to learn that the Chiefs have gone 3 and out the least of any team on offense this season, only doing so 25% of the time, with the Bills, then Eagles, Lions, then Dolphins all close behind. The offense as a whole is currently 7th in yards per game and 3rd in passing yards per game, but are 19th in rushing yards, 15th in red zone TD percentage, and 12th in points per game. And those last 2 things I mentioned are the biggest concerns in my opinion for the Chiefs offense. The decline they've taken scoring points as a whole, but especially in the red zone, as last year they were the 2nd best in the NFL. So if they can get that figured out, this is going to be a very hard team to stop come this postseason run. Something else I was curious about is how the Chiefs are looking as far as 3rd down conversions go. A few weeks ago, they were 1st in the NFL. Well, they dropped a few spots, but are still currently 5th best on 3rd downs, converting 45.54% of the time. However, we all know the real struggle at times has been converting on 3rd or 4th and short, and Christopher Tenpenny did us all a favor manually researching every 3rd and 4th and 1 so far this season. He found that the Chiefs are 8 for 15 on 3rd and 4th and 1 so far, which isn't horrible, but certainly not the best considering the QB sneak has a league-wide success rate of 83% since the start of 2022. But here's the craziest part of his findings. The Chiefs are 7 for 9 on 3rd or 4th and 1 when handing it off to Pacheco or McKinnon, and just 1 for 6 with any other play call. And that, my friends, is why many around the kingdom were frustrated with that late 3rd and 1 play call in the Dolphins game when the Chiefs ran a light play-action pass and Mahomes ended up having to throw the ball away, which also stopped the clock, helping the Dolphins out a bit near the end of the game. So to recap that stat, the Chiefs have a 77% success rate when running on 3rd or 4th and 1, and just a 16% success rate when throwing during those short yardage situations. Therefore, if the Chiefs are going to continue to refuse to run a QB sneak, I understand their reasons with Mahomes' knee, I get it, whatever. But if they're going to do that, feed Pacheco or McKinnon and call it a day. Speaking of the running backs, I'm still a bit surprised to see the Chiefs are 26th in the NFL in rushing play percentage, running the ball just 39.1% of the time. And I get it, they are a pass-first offense. I don't expect them to change that, but when the receivers have been noticeably struggling, you would think the Chiefs would adjust slightly to favor the run more at times, given the fact that Isaiah Pacheco is averaging over 4 yards a carry, is tied for the third most broken tackles with 12 of any running back this season, tied for 6th with 377 yards after contact, and has the 8th most rushing yards of any back in the league. Feed that man, please and thank you. However, we all know the Chiefs will only feed their running backs so much, and that's why the attention has heavily fallen to the wide receiver room and the lack of overall production from them at times. Sure, Rashee Rice is doing well, currently leading the room with 378 receiving yards, and while that's impressive for a rookie in Andy Reid's offense, that still has the Chiefs' leading receiver ranked 44th overall in the league of all receivers. However, Rice is tied for 11th with 4 touchdowns, matching Travis Kelce's 4 scores, and Kelce, you know, this is no surprise, he currently leads all tight ends in receiving yards, but let's put Kelce aside for a moment because outside of him, Rice has been the main bright spot of the wide receiver room. And you could also tip your cap to Justin Watson as well on his dependable deep catches. So you've got Travis Kelce, Rashee Rice, then Justin Watson in receiving yards on the team. Meanwhile, MVS has struggled with contested catches this season, dropping several, fumbling once, almost twice if you look here at this play, and is on pace for around 500 yards by season's end, which would be roughly 200 yards less than last year. But to be fair, Mahomes also has underthrown him at times, though again, even with that, some of those deep balls were catchable. So I am hoping for fingers crossed, and expecting more moving forward from MVS in the second half of the season. But out of the entire receiving room, I think one of the biggest surprises for me is that Kadarius Toney's production has stayed pretty freaking low so far through 9 games. I mean, look at this. Isaiah Pacheco has 24 receptions for 160 yards and a touchdown. McKinnon has 17 receptions for 147 yards and 3 touchdowns. And Kadarius Toney has 20 catches for 127 yards and a touchdown. Even the running backs are outpacing him in receiving stats, which is very odd to me considering the fact that the reports all offseason long was that Kadarius Toney was viewed as the team's would-be to be wide receiver 1. Well, Toney is currently wide receiver 5 in total yards, has the same amount of targets as Isaiah Pacheco, and is averaging just 14.1 yards per game and only 6.3 yards per reception, which is over a 3-yard per catch drop compared to last year. And get this, the only players averaging less yards per game than Toney are Mecole Hardman, who just got here, Justin Ross, who's not even here right now, CEH, Richie James, who's been on IR most of the season, and Blake freaking Bell. And while Mecole Hardman is below Toney on that list, he's quickly climbing the ladder in overall snaps, already logging 46 snaps in 3 games on offense. Meanwhile, Kadarius Toney has logged just 32 snaps in the last 3 games, and through 9 games total so far, he's seen a total of 141, talking about Toney. And part of that reason with Toney has to be injury related, at least in the earlier part of the season. Remember, he had knee surgery after injuring it the first day of camp, came back with his knee on the injury report until week 3, when the injury report then became focused on his toe, which limited him in practice over the next 2 weeks until week 5. The toe stayed on the report, though he remained a full participant in practice until he briefly had no injuries listed during week 8 leading up to the second Broncos game, but went back on the report after this game with his ankle being listed the next week in preparation for the Germany game, though he did fully participate all week and looked great out there on this 1 reception before not being targeted again. So yeah, injuries are a part of it for sure, though most of the week he's still been a full participant in practice. Look at this though, week 5, he had 25 offensive snaps, week 6 he had 30, now look at the last 3, 13, then 12, then 7. And while Toney continues to decline in snaps, Mecole Hardman has pretty much doubled Toney's snaps the last 2 weeks and had almost the same amount of snaps as Toney the first week Mecole played with the team after being traded from the Jets and only in town for a few days. So my question is, what in the heck is going on with Kadarius Toney? Some say the Chiefs are saving him for the second half of the season, keeping his body fresh with the plan of using him more as the postseason gets closer. I hope that's it. Some say, though, he's in the doghouse based on his on-the-field performance issues, especially earlier on in the season, like the Lions game, among other plays here and there. And while both of these reasons could play a role, I'm still not sure what to make of it all. Then, Andy Reid recently said he saw something from players he hasn't seen before with them running the wrong routes, and hopefully that's not what's going going on with Toney considering how long he's been here. Regarding his health, he's seemed healthy the last few weeks and his snaps have continued to dip, with his second fewest snaps in a game taking place against the Dolphins. His fewest snaps in a game all year was week 3 against the Bears. However, there's a pretty good reason there. His toe was pretty banged up and they were intentionally trying to rest him to keep that toe from swelling up even more. This time around though in Germany, I have no idea what to make of him playing just 7 total snaps, which was the fewest of any receiver on the team. So something is definitely going on. Plus, when you look at him throughout the season, the jet sweeps have been lackluster. Toney doesn't quite seem himself in his movement, though he shows flashes, but part of me hopes it really is just the team preserving his body for the postseason run, though again, all offseason reports were pointing to the Chiefs believing Toney could be the team's wide receiver 1, and he's currently near the bottom of the list in regards to receiver production through the first half of the season. So, with all that being said, what do you guys make of this? Is it health related, saving him for the playoffs? On the field issues, a lack of trust between him and Mahomes? Is he running the wrong routes? Or maybe even a combination of everything I just said? Let me know either way in the comments down below. And until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those?